Welcome back to the kitchen and the Business of Forging Agreement podcast. My name is Lisa, and sitting across from me is my dear friend and colleague, John Worthington. So today we're doing session 2 of our Practicality of the Spirit Discussions. And the first session was really an overview about spirit in our lives. So today we want to delve a little bit deeper into that idea. But before we begin, remember to hit that subscribe button and also the notification bell so you know when we are posting our next podcast. All right, so let's go.
Okay.
In your book, The Office of Shaman, the first function that you talk about is B1, and also the corresponding tool of programming.
Right.
Okay. But now Castaneda, in the book series that he has done, he talks about the abstract cores. And the first 3 are the manifestation of the spirit, the knock of the spirit, and then the trickery of the spirit. So my question today is, so first, what is Castaneda really talking about? Because it seems to be steeped in a lot of magical language and such. And then, how does that compare then to what you talk about with B1?
Okay. A complicated 2-part question. I see.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think that Castaneda had to talk to people that were not necessarily well educated.
Okay.
In other words, if you think about this, the tradition that he represents or represented was several generations old. It was more than 2 or 3 generations. It was I think 16 or 18 generations of people that had gone through these kinds of trainings. And so the people that he could draw from, or the people they could draw from for this training that they talked about, were relatively, let's say, from humble beginnings. Okay, they didn't really have much of a formal education, because it wasn't a formal education that was available at the time. There was some, but not a lot. And so they had to break it down to where people could understand it, I think. Because they weren't really dealing with really large abstractions. So they had to talk about it in terms of the spirit manifesting to somebody, which happens, I think, to everybody. Every single person that ever has lived, the spirit is manifested to. I think the spirit even knocks on the door for everybody that comes around, that's been around. And I think it tries to be as tricky as it can be, in order for people to pay attention to what it does.
Okay.
Whereas what I dealt with was with a different population, and I dealt with something that I thought that people could understand in one fell swoop rather than in several parts.
Okay.
So rather than talking about the manifestation of the spirit, or the knock of the spirit, or the trickery of the spirit, I simply took the position of saying, okay, look, the spirit exists. It exists in our life. And the only way that we can really see it is to know what we're listening to. And so if I've got programming that I don't understand, I don't know whether the spirit's talking to me, or my programming's talking to me, or whether anybody's talking. It was just me babbling on to myself.
Well, yeah, there's that. Yeah.
So by stopping and starting to understand your programming, and the various parts of various levels of programming, and the various parts of programming, you can reduce the noise in your brain, or in your thinking. And when you reduce the noise in your thinking, then I think what begins to happen is that you can begin to hear the spirit rather than hear yourself talking to yourself. although I don't know that the spirit speaks the way that we do, maybe it's just nothing more than we can see a vision that we need to go chase down, or perhaps it's that we can hear some kind of siren song or some kind of music that we can identify with.
Okay.
Maybe it's an instructive, be here and do this. Now be there and do that. It can be lots of different ways, I think. But essentially what you're doing is that you're saying, okay, yeah, the spirit exists, and so it doesn't need to manifest itself to me. I can see that the spirit exists, and it doesn't need to knock on my door. I can see that's something that's available. And it doesn't need to be too terribly tricky, although it probably does, because I'm probably going to deny what it is that it's going to tell me.
There's that too.
Yeah. So I think that those three things kind of fall into the category of programming, actually.
Okay.
So in other words, if the spirit's knocking on my door or showing itself to me somehow or the other, it's going to be something outside of my programming. It's not going to be my regular programming.
Mm-hmm.
If it's knocking on my door, it's going to be something outside of me, not something in me. And so I need to be able to differentiate between what's outside of me and what's inside of me. And I think that's where Lilly comes around, and he says, you got to pay attention to the internal and external reality, for instance.
Okay, yeah, I think that'd be something good to explain what he's talking about.
Well, we all have two realities, at least that we deal with. One of them is an internal reality, our fantasy world, our Walter Mitty world, and the other one is the external reality, which is, well, it's reality.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now the thing is that we all tend to think that our view of reality is different than what anybody else's view of reality is. That just isn't true. I don't think reality is reality.
Mm-hmm.
And the sun is the sun. The moon is the moon. I don't care what your opinion of it is. It's still what it is.
Right.
Okay. You can opine all you want to about it being something other than the sun that it is, or the moon that it is, or the tide that it is, or the water that it is, or the earth that it is, or the mountain that it is. But it's still an external reality to be dealt with, to be addressed somehow or the other. So there's a difference between internal and external reality that also can be differentiated in this manner. In the internal reality, everything's possible. I can imagine how to do anything at all. It doesn't mean I can actually do it. It means I can imagine how. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, right.
And the same thing is true for the external reality, except it has certain limits.
Yes, it does.
I can say, well, I can flap my arms and fly in my mind, and I can glide, and I can do all this stuff, like a kid flying an airplane. But in the external reality, it doesn't put up with that. It says, you do that thing, you're going to break your neck or leg or something. Don't do that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so there's a difference there. Okay. Well, the spirit knocking would be an external reality event. Even though the spirit is connected to the physical biological apparatus, it's still an external event. It's something that's outside of my thinking mind.
Okay.
Okay. And so I need to know what are my thoughts, and my thoughts are my mind is defined as all of the programs, whether they're autonomic or natural or whatever they are. All the programs that I have in my thinking, it makes up the sum total of my mind. And what I do with that is up to me, really. But the spirit would be outside of that. It wouldn't be part of that thing, okay? Mm-hmm. Because it appears as though the spirit has a different agenda than what I do, for instance. Okay, for me, I'm trying to accomplish something to make some money and eat well and do all those good things that we all do with success. And the spirit is trying to make something real.
Okay.
Okay.
Right. Yep.
So if we begin to think about it from that perspective, not that there's not other ways to think about it, but if we can include this way of thinking about it, then it gives us a way of considering at least some other aspects of the spirit that we normally do not. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't necessarily mean that the spirit is in our service, which is kind of the way that Castaneda presents it, is that the spirit is in our service, but rather that we are co-partners with the spirit. Okay, that the spirit has got something it has to do. It wants to create reality. And so do we, really. We get married and we have children and we create reality. We buy houses, we buy cars, we build roads, we build internets, we fight with each other, we make wars and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
Those are all real things. And the spirit is interested in making real things happen, it appears. So if we were to take that approach, then what Castaneda is talking about in terms of the manifestation of the spirit, the knock of the spirit, and the trickery of the spirit is pretty much all wrapped up in the idea of our own programming, because we can't see it. You can't see what you're looking with, and we have to look with our programming. We can't look with anything else. So that kind of leaves us in talking about the same thing, but from different perspectives, perhaps. It's the same entity, the same expression of energy, etc., but from different perspectives. Okay.
All right. So when you're talking about, this might be interesting about what programming is. How does that
Well, programming exists on let's say on 3 levels at least. Okay, there's the level where we call it, we say that it's the self-meta programming, which is kind of like our code, the code that's in our biocomputer, and it's based on what we learn early on in life. Okay, because those are the first things we learn, then we build on those things. And then there's metaprogramming, which controls sets of programs, and then there's programs, which is just the instructions to do stuff. So if you look at it from the other direction, from where it was built back downward, you'd say, okay, there's logic out here that's on the computer screen, for instance, okay? And then there's programming, which is how I feel about this thing or that thing or the other thing, okay? And it's essentially an app. It's an application. It's like Solitaire and WhatsApp and Messenger and email, and those are all applications. Okay, those
Facebook,
are all
Instagram,
on and on and on. Your altimeter or Siri is an app. Okay? Okay, so there are these things that are the reason why they're called apps is because they take a portion of the code that makes up the meta program, and they apply it. Okay, so for instance, in your Facebook app, okay, you have a voice over internet app code that's there that allows you to connect to the internet and therefore to Facebook. You have part of your pages or your word processing program there, so you can type. You have your photo programming in there, meta programming in there, so that you could take pictures and send pictures of you eating stuff and so forth. You're cutting the grass, and taking a bath.
But your imagination is wild.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, but those are all apps. Those are all they all take a part of a basic code, and they apply it to this other smaller program, so it doesn't all get transferred. Just portions of it. Well, those larger programs are meta programs, we could call them. Okay, like voice over internet protocol, it's a larger program. It doesn't do one thing. It does a lot of stuff. Word processing is a large program. It has languages and fonts and on and on and on and on, colors and all kinds of goodies. The Photoshop thing, the photo part of the graphics, it's all part of that big, huge graphics program that we have. Okay.
Yep.
And so that's kind of what programming is about. But in the human biocomputer, it looks like beliefs and real emotions, as it were, things that get us up and move us, and not just anger and fear and hate and all those things, but also our ikigai and our other varieties of motivational programming.
Get us up in the morning, kind of.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. Yeah. And then there's how we feel about things, and then there's what we actually talk about. Well, if you can understand why you're doing something like that, then you can begin to see if there's external influences on what you're doing. And those external influences can be of various varieties. They can be, like Castaneda talks about in terms of being signs. He says, okay, the Spirit left me a sign. I think he talks about that when the Nawal Elias met Julian, who was going to become the Nawal Julian, that one of the signs that he got was a hawk or an eagle or something that swooped down and tried to take his hat.
Oh, sorry, yeah, yep.
And he said, well, what the hell is this? This doesn't usually happen. This is something new and different in the world.
Yep.
And so when he tried to walk away, the bird came back and did it again. He said, well, wait a second, maybe I better pay attention here.
Yep.
What's going on? And so that's when he realized that there was something happening with Julian which was unusual. Well, that's an example of the Spirit giving us a sign or a thing a way of deciding things. And we all use them. We all have signs in our own mind that we follow. Whether it's somebody agreeing a certain way or somebody nodding a certain way or somebody saying, yeah, okay, I see. Whatever that is, we all have signs of whether it's a good deal or a bad deal, or whether I have a good feeling about it or a bad feeling about it. But it comes about with the signs that we see. Okay. Now, that's kind of the idea of the Spirit to begin with in Castaneda's material, is that the Spirit is serving the human. The human's not in partnership with the Spirit, but rather the Spirit is serving the human, as it were. And I think that's a different approach than what I prefer to take. I prefer to take the idea that I'm in partnership with the Spirit rather than that I'm serving it, or it's serving me, I should say, or me serving it either. I don't think either of those ideas actually work.
Right, because it's like it's almost like it's out of balance somehow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like the title of this session, these sessions are, it's the practicality of the Spirit that we need to pay attention to.
Yep. Which takes us into, so like we talked about programming, and if we understand our programming, then it's like, we can like hear the Spirit, we can see that in our lives more clearly.
Right.
And so once, which actually gets you to be one.
Right.
So once you get there, so like, then like, what are the advantages?
Well, let's say that the greatest advantage is that Spirit is a very practical entity. It isn't very moral, but it is very practical.
Okay.
And one of the things that I think that the church and institutions of that ilk have always tried to do is to try to substitute the practicality of the spirit for some kind of a morality, an invented morality, let's say. For lack of an understanding, perhaps, of what the spirit is doing. Maybe it's just because people are like that. And for the most part, I think it's a good thing that they had that morality was developed. I really do. I think it was necessary. But at the same time, it has its limits. It's like we were talking about the other night, that, in the Ten Commandments, honor thy father and my mother is a very practical statement. It just don't commit adultery. That's pretty practical because it keeps peace in the family, as it were.
Yes.
And the thing is that sin is really, if you think about the nature of sin itself, what it is a practical way of talking about, to people who don't have a computer model. It's a way of talking about errors in the code.
All right. Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if to commit a sin or an error is to what you do, what that sin or that error is that you have a set of beliefs in that you call your basic code of conduct, or your code, the computer code for you. And so if you break that, then you're kind of providing a conflict within your own thinking.
Right. So that cognitive dissonance is happening.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what happens then is that rather than saying that that we're wrong about it, we can say that we've made a mistake in how we programmed something, or how we coded something, let's say.
Okay.
All right. And so it's easier then if we can take the approach of saying, well, let's find a way of solving that problem, rather than saying, okay, you're morally wrong. Okay. So
Right.
Spirituality, or spiritualness, or spiritualists are not people who are involved in moral codes, but rather in practical application of thought. Because if it's not practical, the spirit isn't. What's it going to do with it?
Yeah. I mean, that when you start thinking about it from there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why do you build a bridge? To get to the other side of that.
Yeah.
Right? So you can get to the other side by going down into the river and walking across and get back up and then go. But if you have a bridge, you don't have to even get your feet wet. You just walk right across it there. Okay,
Exactly.
that's a practical solution.
Yes, it is.
Well, that's something that we construct, and that requires agreement. That requires more than self to construct a bridge. And if it can be defined as more than self, then it's probably going to be defined as spirit directed at the very least. Wow.
So, I mean, there's lots of examples of that. Then you can.
Yeah, there are. Castaneda, I think one of the next things that Castaneda talks about after this particular set right here is how it is that he and Don Juan go to this cave, and he dreams about things in the cave that he can't really explain. Well, you see, from the spirit standpoint, that's a practical application of knowledge.
Okay, so that dreaming, be able to, like Castaneda was dreaming about, I don't actually remember it in the book anymore.
I think what he's dreaming about is something that he could see that he couldn't actually physically see from where his position in the cave.
Ah, that's right. Yeah.
But yet he saw this plane that was out in front of him, but he couldn't see it really from the cave. Okay.
Yeah. It didn't make any sense where things were.
Right,
Yeah.
because it was a dream, and so even though he felt as though that it was a real thing, well, that's a hell of a dream there, I guess. But the spirit is saying, okay, there's these realities that we have to address.
Right.
Okay, and there are things that we have to understand. That you have weird dreams doesn't necessarily make you a spiritual person. I think that if that weird dream it doesn't have a practical application, it's just that, it's a weird dream. But if you can do something with that weird dream, then you've got more you've got more. So to answer your question about what's the advantage of dealing with your programming and reaching to the place where the spirit can express in you, is that you can begin to have a place to get along with other people. Because in order to get along with other people, you're going to have to be in harmony with them. Right. Which means that you're going to have to move how you assemble the world. You can't assemble the world the same way that you always have and expect the entire world to come kiss your behind because you assembled the world a certain way. Everybody did. Exactly.
That's the thing, because everybody has assembled the world differently.
Right. Now, here's the thing. Is that legal? Of course it's legal. Is it a good thing? Yep, it's a good thing. Is it confusing? Yes, it is that too. But it doesn't mean that we're all talking about different things. We're all talking about the same reality.
Right, just viewed from a slightly
in other words,
perspective.
Yes, or a different angle, let's say, or we're looking at a different facet of the diamond, perhaps. Okay.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
But we're all kind of like those blind guys that ran into an elephant.
Yes, that's
one thought it was the elephant was described like a rope because he had a hold of the tail. One thought it was a tree because he got a hold of the leg. The other one thought it was a wall because he ran into his side. So it's just different aspects of the same issue. Okay. And so I think that you can see that in biblical scripture, for instance. I think you can see that in Sanskrit writings. I think you can see that in what Buddha says and what Confucius says and so forth. I think you can see the same thing in lots of different places. I think a lot of poets refer to the spirit, really. Because it's not something that you can say, it's not something that you can really point at, because it doesn't necessarily exist in our world. It's connected to us, but it's not necessarily exist in our world. It's kind of like the E8 figure. Okay, because one explanation I've seen about that was that the E8 is a quasi crystal. It's a shadow of another crystal at another dimension. Which is a shadow of another crystal in another dimension. Okay.
Right.
Okay. So, and if you figured the angle of the light and the shadow and so forth exactly right, then the 8 actually goes through those 8 dimensions. Well, I don't understand those 8 dimensions, but I do understand the idea of a quasi crystal, and I understand that E8 corresponds pretty much with the points of subatomic particles that we can observe, or that we know has to exist. Now, that doesn't mean that I can see all those subatomic particles, because they may not exist on my plane. They may exist on another reality. But it's still the same reality that I'm living in. It's just that it's another dimension of that reality. So the soul spirit region can be connected to us in the same way that the E8 is connected to a 4th dimension or an 8th dimensional crystal. Now, one of the things that really have convinced me of this was the study that came out, I don't know, maybe a year or so ago, that used some kind of geometric algebra or algebraic geometry. I'm not sure which way it is, to demonstrate that our neurons sometimes align in other dimensional forms. That sometimes they align in 11 or 13 dimension forms.
Interesting.
And I don't do that. I guarantee that I don't do that. Okay? That it happens is really quite interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it would indicate then that we are connected to those other dimensions somewhat as well. That we must at some level or the other be able to access that information, or maybe our computer operators can access that information.
Right. And that would be the different. Yeah, that would be that external force. Yeah.
Right. Now, here's the thing. There is proof of this? No, I can't prove it. No, I don't even want to try.
Mm-hmm.
What I'd like to do, rather than try to prove any of this, is to talk about it from the standpoint of saying, okay, it doesn't hurt you to put it on and wear it.
Exactly.
It doesn't really hurt anything. You're not going to lose anything. You're not going to be any more silly than you already are. You're not going to be any meaner than what you already are. Nothing's going to change for you to try this on and see if it fits.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the whole point of these sessions, really, is to say, okay, look, there are other ways of describing the world rather than to say there's right and wrong and left and right and up and down and that's the end of it.
Mm-hmm.
There's more in the world than Republican and Democrat, for instance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's more in the world than right and wrong. I'm right and you're wrong. There's more in the world of saying that I'm bigger than you are, I'm better than you are. You don't have as much money as I do, so therefore you're less than me, or any of those kinds of comparative ideas.
Right.
Those ideas all seem to be rather moral as opposed to practical.
Yes. And yeah, absolutely. Which reminds me, there is a quote that you used in the Dyad class from Rumi.
Mm-hmm.
Because something like, out beyond right doing and wrongdoing, there is a field, I'll meet you there.
Right.
Which seems that, when I think about that quote, it's out there to solve the problem, not to point fingers at who's right and who's wrong and who's more moral, right. and so on and so forth.
Right. I think that quote's by Rumi.
Yeah.
And it actually describes a reality that is highly desirable, because as long as I can blame somebody else for my problems, I can't solve them.
Yeah.
Okay, and so just to say that I'm right and you're wrong is to blame you for my problem. Neither one of us can therefore solve the problem. And so I think that's one of the reasons why I lean heavily towards the idea that the spirit is more practical than moral. Mm. And I think that morality has to be practical.
That's interesting. Right, because it grounds it then.
Right. If whether you're going with the Old Testament rules and regulations or the New Testament suggestions that Jesus made in his parables and in his talks and so forth, I think that what you'll find is that all of those ideas are eminently practical. They're not moral, they're practical. And so it leads me to believe that the spirit is more interested in practicality than it is in morality. And so I tend to think that people who perceive themselves to be moral rectitudes or something probably are not very spiritual at all.
Yeah, from there, I wouldn't think so, because I don't think they actually have that understanding in place. For whatever reason.
Yeah, and I don't know that there's a really that we could really differentiate between understanding and not understanding. I don't really think that's a feasible idea. I think it's a matter of either expressing or allowing the Spirit to express through us, or
okay.
making arrangements for to express through us, or just going on our goofy ways, I guess, maybe. Because, it's like my MacBook Pro. It's a smart little computer and everything, but if it doesn't work for me, I'm not going to keep it around, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, and it can be all as smart as it wants to be. It can do all the things it wants to do. I don't really care. I'm happy if that does all the things it can do. It doesn't need me. It doesn't need me to pay attention to the time or the date or anything. Well, that's wonderful. I just think that's great. But at the same time, when I need to calculate something like how much is the peso today, I want to ask it. I want it to answer me. Okay.
Yeah.
If I want to say, well, how far is it down to Walmart? I want it to tell me it's about 7 minutes. Oh, okay. I can find that. But it's those kinds of things that it does for me, even though it's doing all those things on its own. I still take advantage of those things that it does. Okay, and I think if we had that kind of same mental attitude about the Spirit and its practicality, I think it makes the Spirit and the introduction of the spirit idea into our considerations as to being, well, really quite important. Really a very, well, like, again, a practical matter, not a spiritual or moral matter. I'm going to go to heaven or hell about it. It's like, just makes life easier is what it does. Not anything else. It just makes life easier. So if you're asking me about what Castaneda is talking about, I think that's what he's talking about. I think he's talking about ways of explaining what the Spirit does to somebody with humble beginnings. And it's the same thing that I'm talking about, the same thing that Lily's talking about, the same thing that the Bible's talking about, the same thing that Confucius is talking about, or Buddha. They're all talking about the same thing. It's just different ways of looking at it. So to argue about it, for us Christians to say, well, those Muslims are wrong, or those Muslims say that us Christians are wrong. Yeah, we don't agree about a lot of things, but that doesn't mean we're not talking about the same God. We're not talking about the same creation. We're not talking about this. We don't live in the same world. And my way is not any better than your way. It's just it's different than your way. But I'm glad that you're doing your take on that, so that I can learn from what you've learned, and maybe you can learn from what I've learned. Maybe you've surpassed what I've learned. I don't know.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It's like we can, when we do take that morality out of it, it's like appreciating what each person has, appreciating each person, period.
Right. Because you just got to take the rights and wrongs out of things, because those are just fighting words.
Yes.
And fighting is not practical.
No, it is not.
It's destructive, not practical. And so if I take the approach that if the Spirit is a practical entity, then I have to also take the approach that practical entity is well, it's expressing in me in a certain way.
Yeah, it's interesting, like how destructive, like war is, and it's almost like when you're talking about this practicality of the Spirit. So instead of warring and doing the right and wrong and all those myriad ideas there and being destructive, with the practicality of the Spirit, it actually builds and creates.
Yes. But not only does it build and create, but it also finds agreement.
Right, so that building and creating can exist.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
when it can't find agreement, then destruction is sure to follow.
Right.
So it behooves us to find agreement with other people, not disagreement.
Right, solve the problem,
Yeah.
not the blame.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. And
I think it's stated, fix the problem, not the blame. Right?
yeah. Yes, yeah, I think it is. And it's like finding that common ground where people can agree.
Right.
You know?
Right. Because there's room for everybody's thoughts. We all have them already anyway.
Yeah.
But there's no reason for me to fight with you about your thoughts. There comes points in time where people say, well, my thought means that I have to control what you do, or your thought's trying to control what I do. That's not going to work well.
No.
There has to be another way of dealing with that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. For instance, a contentious argument right now in the United States is abortion, maybe in the world. And you know what? There certainly are people who have a moral high ground where they say, okay, you can't be killing a baby. There's moral high ground there. There is, but it's not a very practical high ground.
No.
Okay, because the bottom line is that no, you don't want to have a crack baby coming along to have to take for society have to deal with for the rest of its life. You don't want a teenage mother having 3 kids before she's 20. That doesn't help the children or the mother or anybody else.
Yep.
So from a practical standpoint, I can see where the abortion makes sense. From a spiritual standpoint, I can even see where the abortion makes sense, because if the spirit, if I deal with the idea that the spirit comes back and continues to come back until we get it right,
Just interesting. Yeah.
then we've just set the spirit back in time, and the spirit may not even have a watch.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so if it's set back in time, I don't see necessarily the moral rectitude as being worthwhile. I'm not disagreeing with people who take that approach. I agree with them that they're right. Okay, I'm not telling them that they're not right, but I also have to agree that the people who have to have that abortion, or who feel like they should have that abortion, also have reason. It's a very practical and compelling reason. And
Yes.
I don't think that my morality. See, that's the thing. It's like, if I want to be spiritual about it, really, if I want to express the spirit, then I have to say, okay, the practical part here makes a lot more sense than the moral part. Because if your morality is based on practicality, and the spirit is practical, then your morality and the spirit are in agreement. But if your practicality is based on your morality, you're not standing on firm ground.
No, not
that's squishy.
Okay. Maybe a little smelly.
Yeah. Well, it could be a lot of things. Yeah. It's not firm. Okay.
No, that is for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what else is on your mind then?
That piece is very interesting, because that is one of the battles, definitely within the United States, and I think pretty much a lot of parts of the world. And we're seeing those same moralities in like other parts of our government even.
Yeah, we are. One of the things that a study that I saw the other day, this fellow had gone to all the people who had been arrested for the
January 6th.
For January 6th, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things they found out was that pretty much all of them came from counties where the white population was dwindling, and other populations were rising.
Mm-hmm.
And so that they felt as though the people who went felt as though it shared belief and real that they weren't getting the same fair shake as the other colored people.
Wow.
And so they felt as though that the white culture was being replaced. Well, I've known a few white people, and that ain't going to
No.
happen. That's not going to happen.
No, there's that thing called white privilege, and
Well, it's not so much the white privilege. It's the white attitude.
I think
Okay, you're just not going to. Okay, it's like this. Why is it that the Jewish people can live anywhere in the world and still be Jewish? Because you can't get rid of that. That's part of their culture. That's part of who they are. The same thing with Christian people. Okay, Christian people go to any place in the world, they're still going to be Christian people.
Well, yeah, exactly. Which would then relate exactly to what people are saying. They're white. How do you say it? White culture is going away. It's like that's impossible. It's like
not going to happen.
No. Yeah, that's where they're standing firmly at the moment.
Right.
That's real.
That's right. So, but it's not a practical place to stand.
No.
Okay. It has no vestige of spirituality whatsoever because of that.
Right, and then we end up with something like January 6th, the insurrection, where people are being killed and threatened, and.
But I don't know that was really so much of an insurrection as people trying to say, look, I have rights too. I mean, I can see where people would stand there. They're angry about it because they don't think their rights are being taken away from them somehow or the other. I don't think that's true, but if
but that's what thinking
if somebody believes it to be true, it is true for them.
Right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
And so I can't judge them for following through on what they believe is real. I mean that makes good sense to me to do that. But the other side of the coin, I think that anybody could probably stop for a little bit and say, okay, well, let me check here to see.
Right.
Whether I've thought this through carefully or not.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So anyway, to answer your question here over all this, the reason why I took it from the standpoint of the Spirit expressing through us, if we can straighten up our programming, is because I think that's exactly what we have to do. I think we have to understand our own programming and understand where it comes from and adjust it according to what we think is practical.
Right, and it's that practicality piece that is like so important.
Yes. Yeah, I don't think that anything can stand if it's not practical.
Yes, because wow, it's you didn't say much, but that's a big thought.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, right, because everything that has been built on that practicality idea.
Yep.
Huh. Well, I think that is a very large chunk of food for thought right there.
Okay.
Yeah. Anything else?
No, like you said, that's food for thought. So.
I think that's a great place to wrap this up.
Okay.
That idea of practicality and the practicality of spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And so thank you everyone for joining us. Remember to hit that subscribe button, notification bell, and please like and comment. Head over to Facebook. It's Forging Agreement, and we'll be posting there. And we appreciate any feedback, and we'll see you next time.